is just a little video which I'm going to create about the issue that I'm currently researching now. In Mark, I'm just storyboarding the story, the Gospel of Mark. It's just done the bit where Jesus meets Satan in the desert, and then it skips forward in time actually in the Gospel of Mark, and straight on to, it says, after John the Baptist is arrested, Jesus comes to the Galilee and proclaims he starts proclaiming the kingdom of God and things like that. And then this verse is the one that I'm come to, which is, passing along by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew and the brother of Simon casting the nets into the sea, and they were fishermen. Jesus said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you into fishers of men." So, well-known verse. When I look at the different Gospels and how they seem to talk about this, the one in Matthew is basically exactly the same. Sorry, I missed a bit because he says that, and then it goes on to say, immediately they left their nets and followed him. Going on a little further from there, they saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were also in the boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and went after him. So basically the Matthew account's pretty much exactly the same. But there's an account in Luke, which is Luke 5, and it's basically the same, but there are some differences. Now, when I'm trying to harmonise the Gospels and stuff, what I have to do when you draw the pictures, of course, it gives you a lot more information. And so, for example, with this verse, where are they standing? What are they doing? What are the emotions like? Now, in the longer version, which is from Luke, if it's the same event, which it sounds like, then basically you get a lot more information. So so Jesus is being followed by a massive crowd. I'm just going to sort of paraphrase it. Massive crowd, and then it says he saw two boats standing by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. He entered into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land. And then he preaches off of the boat, basically. After he's finished preaching, it says, when he finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we worked all night and took nothing, but at your word I will let down the net." When they had done this, they caught a great multitude of fish, and their nets were breaking. They beckoned to their partners in the other boat that they should come and help them. They filled up both boats so that they began to sink. But Simon Peter, when he saw it, fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, Lord." For he was amazed at all the things blah blah. Right, so the thing is, in this account, Jesus kind of encounters them, and then says, "Can we go out on the boat?" And then they go out into the deep afterwards, and they catch this miraculous catch of fish. Now, it seems to me that it's the same bit. So I started to look into the commentaries of people saying, is this the same event in the different Gospels? And I started reading, each event again and again, and there's some sort of superficial, slight differences. But the main difference why the people who say it's not the same event, say it's not the same event, is that it comes in a different sequence of events in the Gospel. So in Mark, in Matthew, he does things like heals Simon's mother-in-law, and then it records this event. So the mother-in-law is in Luke 4, and then the miraculous catch is in Luke 5. Whereas in Matthew, and implied in Mark, they meet Peter and have this encounter where Jesus says, "I'll make you fishers of men," and then after that, they heal the mother-in-law, and that kind of makes sense because they meet and engage with Simon Peter, and he becomes a follower, and then they go to his house where they heal the mother-in-law. So in a way that makes more sense, but because Luke has it in a different order, and there are superficial differences between the accounts, people say, oh, well, he walked along, he saw Simon Peter and called him, along with Andrew and John and everybody, and then like 2 weeks later, they then come back, and then they're fishing again, which is weird because obviously it says in Mark and Matthew that they leave their nets, although it doesn't explicitly say in the same way that Luke does that they give it up and leave everything they had. So as Luke put it, it says when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him while he was in one of the cities. Oh no, and then it ends. So they leave everything, it says in Luke. Whereas in Mark and Matthew, it just says they left their nets. So I've read one which is talking about how they kind of initially leave with Jesus, and then they kind of go back to fishing for a bit, and then Jesus calls them again, and then they leave for ministry the whole time. Now, I don't know about that. I think that's being just too... I think that's taking the fact that it has a different sequence of events in Luke way too literally, in my opinion. And as I say, there are some superficial differences, which I'll talk about in a second. But to me, it just seems like the same event, and the fact that they kind of redo the same thing again and again, doesn't seem. And for Jesus to say to them more than once, "I'm going to make you fishers of men" and stuff, it just doesn't seem to me to make as much sense. Now, I looked at the sort of superficial differences between them, and what I mean by that is, in Mark and Matthew, Jesus is walking along the shores of the Galilee. It doesn't mention a crowd. In Luke, it does mention a crowd. Well, there probably was a crowd, it just doesn't mention it in the other ones. The next thing is that in Mark and Matthew, it talks about Andrew and Simon Peter fishing, so they're casting their nets when it says Jesus saw them casting their nets. They're actually engaged in fishing at that moment when he sees them. So in theory, that's night time or at dawn. So it's probably dawn because Jesus is walking about. But the thing is, in the other account, they're kind of not fishing there. It talks about Jesus is there with the crowd. In the Luke account, he says he saw two boats standing by the lake, so they're outside of the lake. It says the fishermen were outside washing their nets, and then Jesus gets into Simon Peter's boat and says, can you put out a little bit, and then he does his preaching off the boat. There's again a little bit of a difference, because in one they're out in the water, and then in the other one they're in. But when I've been looking at this, the reason I call it superficial difference is because people can move and they can change what they're doing, and and the words that describe it in the Bible are kind of quite brief. So yeah, they were fishing, and then it says, and then their boats were on the and their boat, and another one says that their boats are on the shore. So the boats are on the shore, but it doesn't mean that they weren't fishing before. So Jesus can see them. So it says Jesus saw them and they're fishing, and then it says, and then the other one it says Jesus saw their boats on the land, but you don't know that there's not a time lapse in between them, because again, the two accounts for a start. So Jesus could have seen them while they're still out and about, and then they come in, land, pull up the boat, start fixing their nets, and that's when Jesus climbs into the boat and says, "Can you put out," and start preaching. So to me, that doesn't seem to be like a contradiction. It's just that one talks about it in a different way, potentially at a different moment. Also, it talks about some of them that says they're cleaning their nets, and some of them it says they're fixing their nets. But ultimately, I think that it's like the same job given different different titles. So if you wash your nets and they got holes in, then you wash them and you clean them, and if you clean them and they're dirty, you fix them and then you clean them. And so it's the same job, really. The other thing about the two boats being on the shore is it doesn't say. It could be that there's more than two boats between all of them. So in one of the passages it talks about Simon Peter and Andrew being in the boat doing the fishing. So there's two people in the boat. There could be more, but basically it seems there's two of them. And then it says on the shore you've got James and John, and also you've got Zebedee and servants or hired hands. So you've got at least 5 people on the shore and 2 on the boat. So there could be 3 boats, or there could be more. So just because one's boat's out at sea doesn't mean that it can't be any other way. Now I'll probably bring up some more points in a moment, but what I wanted to do was get your sort of opinion on this. So I've talked about how the things could be the same event, or they could be different. Now I want to show you some of the let's see if I can bring it up. So I'm doing the storyboard, you see. Now, we're talking about the Mark account, and the Mark account's one of the ones that's very, very brief. So, as with the baptism of Jesus, there's more like panels than there are words describing what's happening, because the other Gospels give you a lot more information. So here we've got, it's a sort of now after John was taken into custody, so it's John the Baptist, Jesus came to Galilee and started preaching about the kingdom, and he said the time, and it says what he says here, and then this is where it starts the bit we're talking about, passing along the Sea of Galilee. And so we've got Jesus, and I've done it so that they are the implication. I'm trying to imply that they're the same account, but what I'm wondering is how heavily to imply it. So we've got Jesus here walking along with the crowd along the shore, and what I've got is here is the boat with Peter and Andrew, and it's in the water, but it's sailing in to land, so that they are out at sea doing fishing, but they're about to be on the land. And in this option of doing things, I then have a bubble speech thing here saying about Jesus. He saw them, and Andrew's and Simon, and they're fishermen, and so he sees them. And then here, this is, if we do it so this sort of definitely the case that it's the same event, and that is Jesus then effectively waves to Simon and Andrew. And an important note here is because it's not the first time they've met. It seems like it is when you read it superficially, one of the Gospels at a time, but actually in John they meet straight after Jesus comes out of the wilderness after speaking with the devil and after his baptism, because John the Baptist tells Andrew, look, there's the Lamb of God, and then Andrew goes and talks to Jesus, and then goes and gets Peter, Simon Peter, and then Jesus speaks to him, and then that's the first time they meet. But this seems to be like another time, because that is the first time is after Jesus is traveling from where John the Baptist is up to the Galilee region, and then now this is like a completely different bit. So Jesus waves to them. He knows them. They know him. They jump out the boat, and so now the two boats are on the land, and the servants and the Zebedee and everybody. And Jesus climbs into the boat, preaches, and this sequence is again quite clipped. So he gets into the boat, shows him preaching, it then shows him here saying, "Go out into the deep," and then it cuts straight to them pulling in the massive miraculous catch. And then here the boat is full of fish, and Simon Peter's kneeling and saying, so he's got no speech bubble, but he would be saying, I'm a sinner and I'm not worthy. And Jesus says, come with me and I'll make you fishers of men, as he does in the Luke account. Now the other option, and then it would go on to this page, where he says the come with me thing. And then they follow him, and then he goes to speak to John and James and says, come with me. And they've got their broken nets from the miraculous catch, because it says in the Mark account that they're fixing the nets. And then it says that they leave and go with Jesus, and there's Zebedee saying goodbye. Now the reason I've brought it up in this way, where it's obviously come over the top of the other page, is potentially it could go from one to the other. So it could go straight from Jesus walking along and he saw the boat, and then there'd be a black little panel here where it just says that Andrew and Simon Peter are fishermen, and it would be like a break. In comics they call it a beat, where sort of you have a panel where kind of nothing happens, and then it cuts straight to after the miraculous catch without showing the miraculous catch, and this would be to imply that there's a miraculous catch. It's the same account, but not explicitly state it or show it. So in this scenario, in this scene, it's dawn, and then there's the black panel, and then it cuts to them where there's water behind them, and he's obviously shaken. He's saying, I'm not worthy, I'm a sinner. And there's Andrew, who's happy, and Jesus says, I make you fishers of men. But it's, like I say, it's just implied that there's been a miraculous catch. So there's lots of fish around at their feet, but you can't see how many. And then they go over, speak to James and John, and again the net's broken and there's lots of fish in their boat. So again, it implies there's a miraculous catch, but you can't see very well. So if you just believe that they're not the same event, then with this scenario you can just look at it and see him walk up, say, make you fishers of men, call these guys, and then they all leave. And that's what the text gives you. So the question is, how heavily do you imply that it is the same? Should you just accept that you've got to go one way or another, and that it'd be good and interesting to have the full thing so that you can see the context by which Peter is called and told you'll be a fisher of men, after the miraculous catch? Or, just clip it right back so that it's just the text as it comes, and only imply that it's the miraculous catch has happened. This way is much sort of safer in a way, but the way it's showing now. But having the page where they go and catch the miraculous fish and Jesus preaches and stuff, gives a much fuller idea of what's going on, everything. So have a look into it yourself. Read Luke 5 from verse 1, and look at Matthew and Mark's account. Matthew's in Matthew 4. Mark 1, sort of 13 or something, 16. And then have a look, see what you think, and also give your opinion about what you think, how you think it should be, and if you know of any other reasons why they might contradict, or why they can't be the same account. Because if they can't, then that's fair enough, and they can just be two completely separate accounts. But yeah, I'd like to know more. I've done lots and lots of research on this, but if you know something, please let me know, and we can try and make the comic as accurate as possible. Thanks a lot for listening, and I look forward to hearing your opinions. Cheers, bye.